sending you the draft data report. So please let us know if there's anything that we can help to clarify. We hope so. That's the plan. Great. We can roll.
So, colleagues, I hope all of you had the chance to have some refreshment. And I would like to continue today's work, the second part of the morning session. And we are now moving on the agenda to a series of reports on the work of the bodies of the agreement, as well as UNEP, followed by reports on the implementation of the agreement itself. I would like to remind all presenters that we have a very tight schedule, and so please keep the times you have been allocated with your presentations. I would like to first take the report by the Standing Committee, and I would like to ask Simon McCown to report us about the activities of the Standing Committee. Simon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Ooh, that's very loud. I promise I'll keep this short. As most people have seen the report, it is quite a short report and pretty self-explanatory, so there's not that much to report back. Before I kick off, I'd like to thank our hosts for hosting this event, in particular the team who worked very hard to ensure it still went ahead this September. I'd also like to express my sincere gratitude to both the Secretariat and the members of the Standing Committee for the hard work and dedication and perseverance over this, what has been quite an exceptional triennium. It was a pleasure to host the 15th meeting of the Standing Committee in my hometown of Bristol in 2020, but sadly this was the last time we got to meet face to face due to the global pandemic, and all the meetings that we had thereafter moved online. And the pandemic then came to dominate most of our discussions for the rest of the triennium period. Whilst the Standing Committee were keen to find a way for MOP8 to go ahead in person in 2021, after deliberating the issue in quite some depth over an unprecedented number of meetings, we had 8 Standing Committee meetings in the intersessional period rather than the usual 3. It was concluded that a postponement was necessary. And one of the difficulties we had, though, was, however, that the treaty text was silent on how to deal with such an issue in such unprecedented circumstances. So to address this, and based on advice from UNEP legal advisors, we parties adopted a silence procedure on the 16th of October in 2021 to adopt 2 further resolutions to postpone the MOP and adopt an interim budget. These implementing resolutions EX2 and EX3 were adopted on the 1st of December. It was with quite a sense of relief that Standing Committee could decide on its 20th Standing Committee meeting that we could go ahead with the MOP in person this September. Aside from the pandemic, one of the key issues that Standing Issue has been dealing with over this intersessional period is budget. In particular, the significant resource pressures that the Secretariat face, and it's something that I've seen firsthand how hard the Secretariat work with very limited resources at their disposal. As already highlighted by others, the current low level of resourcing is unsustainable and poses a significant risk to delivery of the treaty long term. Consequently, the Secretariat, with input from the Standing Committee, has developed a comprehensive set of budget options for you to consider over the meeting this week. I urge parties to carefully consider the proposals, in particular the critical link between the resources they're prepared to offer the Secretariat and their demands that they put on the Secretariat for work to be delivered during the next 3 years. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the chair of the Standing Committee for its report. And I wonder if you have any questions or comments with regard to the report just heard. So the floor is open for any questions and comments. I see no requests from the floor. And with this, I take that the meeting of the parties take note of the report of the Standing Committee. I would like to turn then to agenda item 9.b, the report by the Technical Committee. And I invite the chair of the Technical Committee, Ruth Cromie, to give us her report.
Good morning, and I would like to present to you the report from the Technical Committee, but after thanking the hosts very much for hosting our MOP this week, and it is really good to be able to be here eventually. So the document then that you have before you is document 8.7, which provides the report from the Technical Committee. So during the triennium that became the quadrennium, we had 3 meetings. The first meeting, Technical Committee 15, was held at the UN campus in April of 2019. The Technical Committee 16, unfortunately, we were not able to take up the generous offer from the Czech Republic of hosting our TC meeting there, but instead, due to the pandemic, we held that meeting as an online conference. And certainly when I saw the volume of the number of tasks within the work plan, I was hoping for extra time to be able to deliver this, but unfortunately I wished too hard and we had a global pandemic, so it gave us extra time. And then the delay of the MOP then gave us a bit more time to work up some of those tasks on the work plan. So we had a 17th meeting of the Technical Committee, which was a short meeting in February of this year, again held remotely by online conferencing, and that then just really took stock of where we were, saw which products we could finish ahead of this MOP, and which pieces of work we could progress to go into the next triennium. And so this intersessional work then was conducted via these meetings, but a lot of it via the Technical Committee workspace, which is a very, very valuable asset of the agreement. So in terms of organisation and delivery of the TC work, the vast majority of the work was based on the 2018, 2021, 22 work plan, which was adopted at MOP7. And as usual, that work plan was divided into the 8 working groups, and each of those working groups was assigned a chair to oversee implementation. Within each of those working groups, the membership comprised of regional representatives, the thematic experts, NGOs and observers, and each working group had a member of Secretariat staff assigned to it to see how we were getting on and support us generally. In terms of delivery, there were 48 tasks in the work plan, and almost 50% of those tasks were designated as essential, and a quarter of those tasks were designated as high priority. So you can see that about 3/4 of the tasks that we had really were very important and had to be delivered to the best of our abilities. There were 8 tasks there which needed no immediate action. So of the 40 tasks then that needed immediate action, some 57% of those were fully implemented, 30% partially implemented, and 13% I'm afraid we were not able to implement. We prioritised those essential tasks, so the fully implemented tasks are skewed towards those particular ones. So overall, the TC drafted or was involved in preparing 11 of the resolutions, 27 of the MOP8 meeting documents, and 12 of the information documents. So about 2/3 of the documents that you have before you for consideration at the MOP this week then have had involvement then with the Technical Committee. Just to pick out some highlights, and I would suggest that you read the document 8.7 to get a better feel for more than the 8 or so I'm picking out here. The first, there was a framework for use by parties for reviewing and confirming the inventory of known nationally and internationally important sites, and to review the inventories then submitted by the parties. And at the time that the report essentially went to press, we had about 41% of contracting parties had submitted their inventories to the Secretariat that we were able to see. The second there is the development of a monitoring framework for the AEWA flyway site network, and that really built on the site network report from MOP8. The third one there is compiling priorities for the development of monitoring of AEWA species and populations. And the last one in this slide there, an assessment of the status of waterbird monitoring synergies with the relevant MEAs and other frameworks, and then making recommendations for how to strengthen those synergies. There was also the development of and approval for submission to the MOP of an overview of the opportunities for addressing causes of waterbird mortality. And the image there is of Svalbard barnacle geese that were severely impacted by H5N1, highly pathogenic avian influenza. So as we have seen over the last 18 months or so, that has been a cause of mortality, causing a lot of conservation concern. There was also short guidance prepared for managing disturbance to waterbirds, and that was guidance that was specifically aimed at wetland managers. Also compiling a concise guidance on provisioning of ecosystem services in relation to migratory waterbirds, and a compilation of an assessment of the potential contribution of AEWA to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. It's probably also worth saying that a lot of the sustainable harvest tasks have been clustered together and are being worked on by an ad hoc working group. We had hoped to be able to open up some of the seabird work, but that will then pass into the next triennium. And it's important to say that really some of the major tasks were absolutely dependent upon generous funding from contracting parties, and really the performance of the technical committee in many ways depends on that sort of support, which we are very grateful for. So in asking the question, could the technical committee be more effective? I think we see a consistently high volume of tasks, and this was reviewed at MOP6 in document 6.7, which really reflected on the sort of growing number of tasks asked of the technical committee. But in the current work plan, with almost 3/4 of those tasks as high priority or essential, we wondered perhaps if a more sort of realistic prioritisation and further prioritisation was needed. In terms of funding for the substantive tasks, as I said, this was really dependent on the generous contributions from parties, and we're extremely grateful, but I think be prepared for further requests. And possibly, if you are able to make those contributions early in the triennium, is really helpful then for planning and helping for outsourcing those products. In terms of effectiveness of the technical committee, the Secretariat are absolutely essential, and I would note that they are still under-resourced, and unfortunately that is despite Resolution 711, which urged the provision of a junior professional officer, but that they are still without that, and that was evident to me. So in conclusion, the technical committee was able to complete a wide range of important tasks during the quadrennium. However, some of those activities could not be implemented really due to volume of requests and insufficient resources then to undertake those. I think the technical committee, I don't think anyone would disagree, is absolutely essential to the agreement, but there is that limited capacity. And the Secretariat then are absolutely fundamental to the delivery of the work from the technical committee. And in order to support them in facilitating the TC's work, I think the provision of that support officer as a junior professional officer really would be very, very welcomed. So in terms of the action then requested of the MOP, the meeting of the parties is invited to note that TC report, document 8.7, and take its conclusions and recommendations into account in the decision-making process as appropriate. And that then is within document or draft resolution 11, and that is the institutional arrangements for the technical committee, and appended to that draft resolution is the draft work plan for the next intersessional period of 2023-2025. And so with that, I will thank you, but also a personal thanks to all of the members and the invited experts and the observers and the Secretariat for all of their work, which made my job as chair then very straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you for this report for the chair of the technical committee. And I would like to open the floor if there are any questions or comments with regard to this report. So I don't see any requests for the floor. And I would like to give a special thanks to Ruth Cromie as an outgoing chair for her very effective and very fruitful work in the technical committee. Thank you very much, Ruth. With this, I would like to turn to our next agenda point, 9C, which is the report by the depository. And I would like to give the floor to the Netherlands as depository to give us its report. Nick Warmelink, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, distinguished delegates, observers, and colleagues. I'll take a brief second. Before going into detail on depository matters, the Netherlands would like to thank the government of Hungary and all those involved in organizing this session of the meeting of the parties, and to thank all present for their continued commitment in waterbird conservation under the agreement. As depositary to the AEWA agreement, the Kingdom of the Netherlands received multiple notifications in the last 4 years. And in preparation of this meeting, we have drafted a depositary report, document 8.8, with all information on the accession of range states to the agreement and on reservations made by parties following the session of the 7th meeting of the parties to AEWA. In the face of our tight schedule, which has been mentioned, it was decided in consultation with the Secretariat to deviate from standard MOP practice and to only recite a selection of the depositary report, referring to the actual report for further details. Regarding the accession of range states, since MOP7 was held in December 2018, Serbia, Malawi, Armenia, Turkmenistan, and Cameroon acceded to the agreement at the time of writing this report. The acceding states did not make any reservations at the moment of deposit of their instruments of accession. Regarding the amendments adopted during the 7th meeting of the parties to AEWA, on the 22nd of February 2019, the depositary published the amendments to the Annexes 2 and 3 and to Table 1 to the agreement, which were adopted during MOP7. Subsequently, the depositary published corrections of the adopted amendments and published the updated Arabic translation of the agreement, incorporating the amendments adopted during MOP7. Document 8.8 also describes 7 reservations received by the depositary concerning the amendments adopted during MOP7. To conclude, the depositary kindly refers the parties to the treaty database of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, where all the relevant information of the agreement, including all the depositary notifications, certified true copies, and an up-to-date list of parties can be found. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Netherlands, for this report. Are there any questions with regard to this report? I don't see any. With this, I would like to turn to the next agenda item, which is the report by the Secretariat. And I invite Jacques Trouvier, the Executive Secretary, to give us his report. Thank you.
Okay. Should I? Yeah. Sorry. Okay. That's fine. So I draft this report in English, and the full report is the document MOP 8.9. So I would like you to refer to this document. I will just give you an overview, and as the slides are in English, I will make my presentation. I will give my presentation in French. So, l'organisation du secrétariat de l'AEWA, sous l'égide, bien entendu, de la réunion des parties, consiste en 4 unités que vous voyez à l'écran. Ces unités ne doivent pas vous laisser penser que nous sommes très nombreux, puisqu'ici, vous avez le détail des personnels qui travaillent dans ces 4 unités. Donc, vous remarquerez que, suite à la vacance d'un poste, il y a 11 personnels qui travaillent au secrétariat de l'AEWA, 7,3 postes équivalents temps plein sont financés par le budget général et 3 postes et demi sont financés grâce à des contributions et des économies que le secrétariat parvient à faire. Donc nous sommes un petit secrétariat. I have a... Mr. Chair, I have a request there. Oh.
Could I ask the technicians to check the translation, because Iceland has no translation. Thank you.
You're all blocked here. And you have translation on that side? May we have another try? On peut faire un autre essai. Did you get any translation? No? No yet? Okay. I can deliver it in English, and then but there is one francophone there, party, Togo, and Madagascar, yeah. So we will wait 2 minutes. If it's not solved, I will switch to English.
So we suggest to wait for 2 minutes for the technicians. Now it's okay. Okay, it's good to, yes. So Jacques, thank you. You can continue.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, c'est bon, parfait. Oui, la diversité biologique, c'est important, la diversité des langues également. Et le secrétariat a 2 langues de travail, comme les Nations Unies, donc le français et l'anglais. Donc, comme je l'indiquais, nous sommes organisés sous l'autorité de la conférence des parties, donc de la MOP, et avec l'appui du comité permanent et du comité technique en 4 unités, ce qui ne doit pas vous laisser penser que le secrétariat est pléthorique, puisque nous avons 11 personnes qui travaillent au sein du secrétariat. Je pense que vous avez fait la connaissance de la plupart d'entre nous. Sur ces 11 personnes, 7,3 équivalents temps plein sont financés sur le budget général, celui que vous allez adopter en hausse, j'espère, vendredi, et 3,5 postes sont financés au travers de contributions volontaires et d'économies que nous parvenons à faire. Donc il a été rappelé que nous avons pu fêter le 25e anniversaire de l'AEWA, malheureusement durant la première année du Covid. Donc cet anniversaire s'est fait au travers de déclarations, notamment publiées sur le site web. Et au cours de l'année, de la période 2019-2022, nous avons 6 nouvelles parties qui nous ont rejointes, la dernière étant le Cameroun, qui figure pour l'instant encore en blanc sur cette carte, et qui passera dès samedi matin en vert. Ce qui nous amène à 83 parties sur les 119 parties de l'ère de répartition de l'accord, 39 en Afrique et 44 en Eurasie. Donc nous avons deux comités, un comité technique, et je remercie Rousse d'avoir rappelé les travaux menés par le comité technique. C'est vraiment le cœur du réacteur de l'AEWA, puisque la plupart de nos décisions sont prises sur les meilleures connaissances scientifiques. Et bien entendu, entre 2 réunions des parties, c'est le comité permanent qui prend les décisions au nom des parties. Et encore une fois, je voudrais remercier son président et l'ensemble des membres des efforts qu'ils ont faits, puisque pour la première fois au sein de l'histoire de l'AEWA, nous avons tenu 8 meetings, 8 réunions, principalement dues au Covid. Le secrétariat de l'AEWA travaille avec de nombreuses organisations. Vous avez eu l'occasion de vous en rendre compte ce matin lors du discours délivré par Amy Frankel, la secrétaire exécutive de la CMS. Je ne rentrerai pas dans les détails, mais on peut citer aussi les travaux de la Commission européenne, et notamment le fait que l'AEWA participe à certaines réunions du groupe d'experts sur les oiseaux et leurs habitats. Nous travaillons aussi avec la Convention de Ramsar, principalement sur tout ce qui concerne la formation et certains cas de mise en œuvre de l'AEWA. Nous travaillons aussi notamment sur les questions de gestion adaptative avec le CIC, qui nous a accueillis hier soir, avec la FAO, et notamment sur un très grand projet qui s'appelle Ressources, et je vous invite tous à assister au side event, à l'événement parallèle qui se tiendra jeudi sur ce sujet, où l'équipe de Ressources fera le bilan de ces travaux. Nous travaillons également et nous participons à l'initiative sur les oiseaux migrateurs de l'Arctique, et Sergueï Dereliev ici est membre du comité technique de la voie de migration Asie orientale, Australasie. Et nous suivons le processus entamé par la CMS concernant l'établissement d'une structure concernant la voie de migration d'Asie centrale. Je ne vous détaillerai pas le plan stratégique ni l'initiative africaine, puisque ces deux aspects feront l'objet d'un rapport aujourd'hui. Je ne vous détaillerai pas non plus, j'ai insisté ce matin dans mon discours sur l'importance de la communication. Vous aurez également un rapport spécifique sur ce sujet, et deux documents ont été rédigés, le document 8.17 et 8.18 à ce sujet. Alors, au cœur de notre action se trouve la coordination et la mise en œuvre des plans d'action, qu'ils soient spécifiques, donc concernant une espèce, ou plurispécifiques, et également le support que nous pouvons apporter aux groupes de travail internationaux sur les espèces. Je vous recommande de regarder le document 8.22 qui vous donne l'état des lieux de ces groupes de travail et de ces plans d'action. Nous avons actuellement en vigueur 30 plans d'action et de gestion, ce qui est beaucoup considérant les ressources humaines dont le secrétariat dispose. Et il vous est proposé à cette MOP8 d'adopter un nouveau plan d'action sur les DER à duvet. Un projet important qui a été lancé il y a maintenant quelques années, en 2016, concerne la plateforme sur la gestion des oies au niveau européen. C'est un projet qui n'est pas financé sur le budget général, puisqu'il ne concerne pas tous les États partis à l'AEWA. Nous avons 16 États partis, incluant la Commission européenne, plus des observateurs. Et l'objectif, c'est de promouvoir la gestion adaptative de ces populations. Donc, il y a 4 espèces concernées, 6 unités de gestion. Et si vous êtes intéressé par les travaux de cette plateforme, je vous invite à visiter le site dédié, soit via la page d'accueil de l'AEWA, soit directement en accédant à la page web du site de l'AEWA. Je me plais à souligner que, afin de partager les connaissances, cette plateforme de gestion sur les eaux a développé de nombreux webinars. Le Covid a eu au moins ce grand mérite de nous permettre en fait de diffuser l'information au travers de séminaires, de webinars. Et ces séminaires ont été très bien suivis. Et ça permet effectivement d'assurer le partage des connaissances avec tous et de débattre aussi des objectifs de cette plateforme. Il y a bien sûr beaucoup d'autres projets, je ne vais pas tous les citer. Le processus d'examen de la conformité de l'AEWA fera l'objet d'un point spécifique à notre agenda de la plénière, donc c'est le 16e point. Un très grand projet financé par l'initiative sur le changement climatique portée par la République d'Allemagne et mené par Wetland International a produit d'excellents résultats sur la résilience des sites. Et vous avez à votre droite une carte qui montre où l'on peut attendre les impacts les plus négatifs sur les populations d'oiseaux suite au changement climatique. Et on voit que une partie de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, une partie de l'ouest de l'Afrique australe, ainsi que le bassin méditerranéen et une partie aussi de l'Asie occidentale et centrale seront touchés. Donc je vous invite à regarder ce projet en détail qui a fait l'objet de nombreuses publications scientifiques. Ce matin, Madame Frankel a aussi souligné le travail que l'AEWA, au nom de la famille de la CMS, a porté sur l'élimination des plombs de chasse dans les zones humides notamment. Et ce débat et ces travaux continuent pour une élimination complète des munitions de plomb, puisque désormais, au moins en Europe occidentale, ce sont ces munitions qui sont à la source même du plus grand tonnage de plomb déposé dans l'environnement. Aussi, on en discutera notamment dans le cadre du groupe de travail sur les questions techniques et scientifiques, donc cet inventaire sur les sites et la qualité de ce réseau. Voilà, c'est un rapide aspect de ce que nous faisons. Je vous invite, pour plus de détails, à examiner non seulement le rapport du secrétariat, mais les autres rapports qui le complètent, et je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for the Executive Secretary's report. Are there any questions with regard to this report? Or comments? I see no request for the floor, so thank you very much. I take that the meeting take notes of the Secretariat's report. The next item on our agenda is the report by UNEP. And the report is contained in document 8.10. There will be no presentation here in the plenary. So can I take that the meeting of the parties take note of that report? Are there any objections? I see no objections. Thank you very much. With this, I would like to turn to agenda item 10, which is the report on the implementation of the AEWA strategic plan from 2019 to 2027. And I would like to remind all of you that this is a very important report. This is our report card for what countries and partners aim to achieve under the agreement during the period 2019 and 2027. And I would like to invite Sergei from the Secretariat to take the floor and give us the report.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to present this report on behalf of the Standing Committee, which is the body that has been tasked with monitoring the implementation of the strategic plan, as you'll hear later on. Just as a reminder, the current strategic plan with a time span of 2019 to 2027 was approved by the previous session of the meeting of the parties in South Africa in 2018, and it provides a midterm perspective for the implementation of the treaty in 3 MOP cycles. It's the implementation framework for the agreement, which is a time-bound framework, which should be used by not only parties, but also it's the governing bodies of the treaty, the Secretariat, and the partner organizations. The Standing Committee, as I already said, is the body that has been tasked by the meeting of the parties with monitoring the implementation of this plan and reporting to the meeting of the parties, and this is the report which follows that mandate. The report has been compiled by the Secretariat for the Standing Committee with consultation, in consultation with the Technical Committee, and was approved by the STC for submission to this forum. The assessment of the report follows the logical framework of the strategic plan, which includes a goal, a purpose, 5 objectives, 27 targets, and 72 indicators at 2 different levels. Each indicator was assessed on the basis of information that is contained in MOP8 documents, as well as some other additional sources. For the purpose level indicators, we have calculated the distance from the aspired target level in percentages. For all the other indicators in the target level, scores have been assigned from 0 to 5, which ranges from non-assessed to achieved. On the basis of that, the report draws an overall assessment of the progress towards the purpose, as well as the objectives and the targets in the strategic plan. And it concludes with a series of recommendations for the further implementation of this operative document. Looking into the achievement of the purpose of the plan, on this graph you have the 6 purpose level indicators and an aggregated calculation on the top. On the right hand side, the axis represents the aspired target, and the bars in orange represent the distance at which we were in 2018. And the bars in blue represent where we stand right now, based on the assessment that we did. So as you can see, for 3 of the purpose level indicators, number 1, number 5, and number 6, we see a negative trend. We're going backwards. So the distance has increased compared to 2018 with respect to the aspired target. Only one indicator, number 3, has a positive trend. We're getting there. We are approaching our target that was set in 2018. And for one of them, which is number 2, we are there where we were in 2018. So it's actually not too bad. We managed at least to maintain our status of 2018, even if we haven't made progress in terms of achieving the target. If we look into the aggregated average distance for all the indicators towards the set target values, we see a 4 percentage point slide back. In 2018, we were 13% away from the targets altogether, and now we're 17%. So we actually are doing worse than in 2018. The assessment suggests, and you'll hear more about those indicators, purpose level indicators, in the presentation on the conservation status report, because this is the source from which we actually have this data. So on the basis of this assessment, we could conclude that the targeted work that the agreement has put into species action plans and management plans delivers some good results. At the same time, the conservation of the flyway site network and the waterbird habitats in the wider environment is really lagging behind. So to simplify it, we're doing well in terms of protecting species, but not so well in protecting their habitats and the sites on which they depend. And this is something which I would like to invite you to take account of and remember in taking the decisions during this meeting of the parties. Let's look into how we're doing in terms of the individual objectives. So we have 5 objectives, as I mentioned earlier. 4 of them are substantive and 1 is enabling objective. All of them, well, 4 out of 5, in fact, based on the scores, the average scores that we have calculated, they're all in the category of limited progress. We're doing best in terms of the enabling objectives. That's number 5. We have a score of 2.8. And we're doing worst in terms of sustainable use of waterbirds. This is objective 2, with score only of 1.8. Unfortunately, objective 4 here is assessed as having no progress at all. and this is quite worrying. This is the objective on the conservation of habitats in the wider environment. Altogether, if we look at the average score for the substantive objectives, it's 1.9, still in the band of limited progress. And if we calculate the average for all the 5 indicators, together with the enabling one, it's still not very different. It's the score is 2. You could see that we have used 2 types of brackets around the scores, and this is just to, what it signifies is that the regular brackets, scores that have been calculated on the basis of information which is incomplete or the quality is insufficient. And the square brackets indicate that certain indicators are postponed because they're time-bound indicators which apply to a later stage of implementation of the strategic plan. So there are caveats here, of course, but this is a fairly objective representation of the situation. If we look into the targets, we see that more than half of them are either having limited progress or no progress at all. 56% fall within those 2 groups. And we have only 1 achieved target at this point in time, but it's tentatively achieved because there are time-bound indicators for a later stage which actually can change the assessment of that target in further reports to the meeting of the parties. So altogether, at the level of the targets, we see some worrying trend. The picture is a little bit more noisy when it comes to the level of the indicators. These are 66 indicators spread across the 27 targets. Still, here we have a quarter of indicators which are with limited progress, but the largest percentage here are the postponed indicators, which we still need to assess in future cycles of the implementation of the strategic plan. Let's quickly look through the recommended priorities for the next triennium, which the report suggests. In the first place, there are a number of targets. I think there are 7. In the first place, we see quite a significant non-compliance across the implementation of the agreement in parties, particularly with paragraph 2.1 of the AEWA action plan. So this needs to actually be taken care of, and the legal measures in that paragraph need to be transposed in all national legislations and adjusted after each meeting of the parties. We need to further strengthen the species action plan implementation at international and national levels. We also need to transpose the legal obligations under paragraph 4.1. We also need to complete the site inventory which we started in the last triennium, and parties are invited to submit to the Secretariat as soon as possible after MOP8 the review of their national site inventories. We need to designate more sites as protected areas and actively manage them, because without the management, we actually are unlikely to achieve the effect that the site network is aimed at. In terms of the habitats in the wider environment, the financing of the joint project between AEWA, CMS and the Raptor MOU is absolutely essential. This is the first step to trigger the implementation of action under Objective 4. Without that project, we won't be able to move from the score 1 in Objective 4. And target 5.6 under the enabling objective, extremely important in fact, invites to mobilize the majority of the resources required, which have been identified in the assessment of the international level coordination and implementation of the strategic plan. So there is a document 8.43 in your document packs, which we invite you to review. This provides that inventory of resource needs. That's for international level, but for national level, countries indeed need to assess their requirements in terms of resourcing for implementing the strategic plan and effectively implement resource mobilization plans. We have only 6 years left until the finalization of implementation of this strategic plan. We also need to improve the assessment for purpose level indicator 4. We have the fundamental information at our end, and the parties will be requested to report to the Secretariat very early in the next triennium. Several targets, we need to collect better information to improve the quality of the assessments. For some of them, we have no assessments at all. And we have 22 two postponed indicators for which we need to undertake advanced planning in order to make sure that we deliver those assessments as required. And national reports. I cannot stress enough how essential national reports are for the monitoring of the strategic plan implementation, amongst many other purposes they have. Currently, the number and quality, you will see from the report that WCMC will deliver later today. We actually need to work both on the number of reports submitted and the quality of those reports. And there is a geographical bias in terms of quality and quantity of reports submitted, and we have received funding from the European Commission to address that for Anglophone countries in Africa, but the resources are not sufficient, so donors are invited to support further the Secretariat in providing training to national respondents. And just to conclude, we are not going to be able to further advance the implementation of this strategic plan unless we increase the cooperation between the parties, we increase the resources that are invested, and we improve the capacity. This is absolutely essential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sergei, for this report, and this clearly shows that there is a lot to be done in the next 5 years to achieve the targets that are set in our strategic plan. I would like to open the floor for any questions or comments with regard to the report. I see the European Union. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states take note of the report, and we consider the important implementation gap and limited progress in achieving the targets of the strategic plan, and therefore the EU and its member states strongly support the recommendations on advancing the implementation of the strategic plan that is contained in the document 8.11, and of course we will come to the relevant part of the draft resolution 3 in the discussion in the working group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, European Union. Are there any more comments? I see no request from the floor. So with this, the meeting take notes of the report on the strategic plan. Thank you very much. With this, I would like to move to agenda item 11, which is the report on the implementation of the African Initiative and the Plan of Action for Africa from 2019 to 2027. And I ask Evelyn Moloko from the Secretariat to give us her report. Evelyn, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good day, everyone. The African Initiative, I will give a very brief overview of the African Initiative, especially for those who are fairly new, was born at MOP8 some 14 years ago, so fairly young, just a teenager to AEWA, but a very important initiative in the framework of AEWA to advance implementation in the African region, where it was realized that there was a backlog in implementation, lagging in implementation of the agreement due to various reasons. It went operational 1 year after adoption at MOP8 in 2009 with coordination established at the level of the Secretariat. And in 2012, the first plan of action for Africa was adopted by the parties as a guide to implement the AEWA strategic plan in the African region. Of course, taking into account the differences in the level of implementation and attainment of the agreement's objectives on various aspects prescribed in the AEWA strategic plan for implementation at the national level. Further after that, we have now a new strategic plan, plan of action for Africa, based on the new strategic plan for the period of 2019 to 2027, which was adopted at MOP7. And in order to coordinate the implementation of the African Initiative altogether, especially the plan of action for Africa, in 2015, MOP6 established a triple coordination mechanism with the Secretariat coordinating overall at the level of through the African Initiative, but also a technical support unit established to support and guide implementation at the national level, working together with the parties and other technical experts through projects and other activities, and a detailed feedback will be provided by the technical support unit after my presentation. Meanwhile, there's also sub-regional focal point coordinators who were established, one in every sub-region of each of the 5 sub-regions in Africa, and with the new terms of reference adopted at MOP7 for the sub-regional focal point coordinators, and these 3 units are working together in order to coordinate activities and implementation of the Plan of Action for Africa and the African Initiative overall. The Plan of Action for Africa aims to guide implementation of the strategic plan. It provides concrete actions and processes for delivery of the AEWA strategic plan targets in the African region. So 267 of these actions and processes, of which a majority of them need to be implemented at the national level, and the rest of them, 112, at the agreement level through the intervention of different bodies of the agreement, including the technical committee, standing committee, agreement secretariat, but also with other partners. At the national level, I would also recall that the activities done by the national implementing agencies are also done in collaboration with a wide range of partners. For the first time, since the adoption of the initial plan of action in this triennium, the first reporting cycle was established as per prescription in Resolution 7.1. So the module was developed for reporting on the Plan of Action for Africa, for which national reports were submitted to MOP8, and we had a 53% feedback or reporting rate from the African parties, which for a first reporting cycle, it looks small, but for a first reporting cycle is at least an encouraging figure, and we hope that for the next reporting cycle we will get more feedback. As Sege indicated, the national reporting, whatever we're reporting on, be it for the strategic plan or for the Plan of Action for Africa or on the population, the status of populations, is very crucial to get feedback from parties and also to guide implementation further on. With regard to having a systematic and complete feedback on the status of implementation of the AEWA Plan of Action, this was not possible during this triennium because we were not able to do an overall assessment, including the reports from the parties, but also on the other activities and actions and processes to be delivered at the agreement level due to the fact that we are lacking indicators overall at action level for the Plan of Action. And the Secretariat, unfortunately, did not have the capacity to develop these indicators, although we had already submitted a concept note for how the methodology on how to deliver this process. So we hope in the next cycle there would be resources available to be able to outsource this task because of the limited capacity within the Secretariat. Just to round up, a new layout, a vibrant layout was also developed for the new Plan of Action to also promote its use at the national level for the various stakeholders who are involved in using this document on the ground. Species action plans are one of the key instruments for key tools for furthering implementation of AEWA, guiding implementation of the international single species, guiding implementation of conservation of species on the ground. And we've seen some feedback already from the level of implementation of on the strategic plan, but at the level of the African Initiative, a lot of actions were conducted on the ground through projects which were funded by various donors, including the European Commission. We had funding from the BioBridge initiative of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So from action on the ground towards implementing these international species action plans to also actions towards coordinating their implementation, which we also have a gap at the level of the Secretariat, and also for getting support from organizations involved in this species action, conservation action on the ground to be able to coordinate action across the species ranges. So for example, for the lesser flamingo, we had a project where we had satellite tagging of lesser flamingos in Senegal, where we trained experts from Senegal and Mauritania on satellite tagging of these birds, and this would help monitor the movements of the species in space and over time. For the Madagascar pond heron, we had activities in Madagascar funded by the United Kingdom and on identifying key breeding areas for the species, especially at the River Lush, where we also had activities to promote conservation at the community level. For the white-winged flufftail, for example, a highly endangered species, we had actions funded in the framework of the European of a project funded by the European Commission, and this involved developing a community-based action plan for the species and also designating the key breeding site for the species as a protected area at the national level. I would not go into much detail because a lot of the information is provided also in the report of the Secretariat, where we have a dedicated section for the delivery of the Plan of Action for Africa. Enhancing capacity in Africa is identified in the Plan of Action as a key need in the region, and a few activities have been conducted by the AEWA Secretariat despite the limitations due to COVID. For example, we had a training of trainers on flyway conservation, conducted for Francophone Western Central African countries in Benin in 2019, funded by the European Commission project. And we also have one which is coming up in February 2023, which will be taking place for small island developing states of the Indian Ocean and would be kindly hosted by the government of Mauritius. Thanks to them for that. We also had a training in the framework of the Climate Change Initiative project, funded by the Climate Change Initiative of the government of Germany, for training on integration of waterbed issues in climate change adaptation measures, policies, and so on. A very practical hands-on training which was delivered virtually, but a very successful training in December 2021. Enhancing institutional capacity, we had our pre-MOP, which was already mentioned in the Secretariat's report, and this was a very useful meeting, bringing together the focal points virtually though, but very useful to prepare them for the AEWA MOP, which is ongoing now. Very active and dedicated involvement from the African parties, I have to say. And Tege already mentioned the national report training, and I would skip that one. The AEWA Small Grants Funds has not been active for the past triennium because of limited funding, but it was instituted by Resolution 1. It went operational in 2010 and has funded a huge number of projects in many African countries, 18 projects in 17 countries. And in the draft Resolution 3, we will see a call for really reinstituting funding for this very important initiative and changing maybe the approach of how it's done to make it more effective. Recruitment of parties was already covered, so welcome to the new parties, Malawi, Central African Republic for this triennium, and Cameroon. And we focus on the Central and Southern African sub-regions where we have a huge gap for membership in the African region. The details on the assessment of the plan, national reports on the implementation of the Plan of Action will be presented by WCMC. I won't go into that, but there are quite some success stories that came out, but yet also some lagging implementation. And the focus we would mention here will be for objectives 1 and 2 on species conservation and promoting sustainable use, and also on some very targeted areas, for example, especially the legislative issues to deal with the agreement, but also strengthening and sustaining resources and technical capacity for implementing the agreement. Thank you very much for your attention, and my colleague from the Technical Support Unit would deliver a report on their activities.
Thank you, Evelyn. I will deliver my speech in French. Okay. Merci aux traducteurs et traductrices. Le ministère de l'Environnement français soutient l'unité de soutien technique à l'initiative africaine depuis 2012. Les activités de l'UST sont mises en œuvre par l'Office français de la biodiversité et la Tour du Valin. Les activités de l'UST sont mises en œuvre au travers de 2 réseaux, le réseau méditerranéen et le projet ressources. Le réseau oiseaux d'eau en Méditerranée, Medwaterbirds, s'attelle depuis maintenant plus de 10 ans à améliorer la qualité et la quantité des données, notamment au travers la mise en commun des données, à travers une base de données commune et qui est également partagée. Cette base de données a permis la publication de rapports techniques nationaux et régionaux, mais également la publication d'articles scientifiques. L'amélioration de la qualité et de la quantité des données a été possible avec le développement d'outils de sessions de formation, notamment en Tunisie pour les partenaires nord-africains, mais aussi grâce à la collaboration régionale. Malgré tout, d'autres collaborations régionales avec d'autres réseaux qui travaillent en Afrique restent à mettre en œuvre. Depuis 5 ans, les activités sont mises en œuvre au Sahel, notamment au travers du projet Ressources qui est coordonné par la FAO. Dans le cadre des activités, notamment, on a pu optimiser les démembrements d'oiseaux d'eau au Soudan avec l'utilisation de la télédétection et la publication. Donc, cette étude a été publiée dans une revue scientifique. Dans le cadre de ce projet également, on a pu soutenir les administrations soudanaises et tchadiennes pour les soutenir dans la désignation d'aires protégées. Et un des produits majeurs qui est valable donc pour les 2 réseaux méditerranéens et ressources est le développement actuellement encore en cours d'un cours en ligne sur l'identification et le suivi des oiseaux d'eau, donc pour l'Afrique du Nord et pour le Sahel. Ce cours en ligne, donc actuellement en cours de finalisation, sera mis sur la plateforme MOOC Conservation. Il va être agrémenté de photos et de vidéos et de quiz d'entraînement qui permettront d'obtenir un certificat. Il est actuellement uniquement disponible en français. Donc en 3 minutes, je ne peux pas présenter de manière exhaustive toutes les activités de l'UST en Méditerranée et au Sahel. Rejoignez-nous lors des 3 side events qui auront lieu jeudi, un sur la Méditerranée, un sur les résultats du projet Ressources et une session de test sur le cours en ligne. Merci à tous.
Thank you very much for these reports. Are there any questions or comments with regard to the reports we heard? I see no requests from the floor. There is one. Uganda. Uganda is asking for the floor. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for that elaborate presentation, but I saw a little bit of maybe not correct facts in as far as when the African initiative was begun, because they did say it was during MOP8 in 2008. So maybe we need to look at it and correct that fact. Thank you.
Thank you for this point, Uganda. And I ask the Secretariat to clarify this.
Thank you very much for spotting that. My apologies to everyone for that. It's my mistake. It's 2008 at MOP4, not MOP8. Thank you very much. I would correct it in the presentation. It is correct in the report.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's just a typo and it will be corrected. Thank you. Dear delegates, we are pretty much on schedule. Thanks to all of you and particularly to the presenters who kept the time that was allocated to them. Now I propose to break for lunch for 1.5 hours. The lunch will be served downstairs. If you go down the stairs, turn to the right, and there is a restaurant, and you will have the lunch there. And the Secretariat asked us that they have some housekeeping announcements, and please, Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for directing the delegates to the restaurant. We wish you a good lunch. Before you go for lunch, please, if you have any pending opening statements which have not been submitted yet, please do so that the Secretariat can publish them. I hope you noted the email address. If not, please approach us. They will be also rotating on the screens here in the plenary and outside. Also, for a reminder for credentials, in case you hold on to your credentials still, please share them with the Secretariat so that they could be submitted to the meeting of the Credentials Committee this afternoon. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch and see you sharp at 2 o'clock.
Thank you very much. I was gonna say the same. So please be back here at your seats by 1:55 sharp. Thank you.